Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the Ask Video Mail for the week of October 17th, 2011. Welcome back to the site to all you members, and welcome to the site to the new members. This is the Ask Video Mail, your chance to get your question in character animation or performance answered in a video just like this one, but I need your question if I'm going to answer it, so please send your questions in. It's the best way to take advantage of the site and get the most value for your subscription. The address to send the questions to is webmaster@kennyroy.com. So, without further ado, very exciting announcement today. The referral bonus contest is in full effect. I did one of these last year and got a good response. This is your chance again. I given a promo code as well so that you can entice all the people that you know to just take a peek inside the site for no obligation. So spread the word around, and remember, the person who refers the most members gets a free book. How to Cheat in Maya 2012, written by the very talented and handsome Eric Luta, and I helped out a little bit. Okay, so don't forget to check that out. This week's question is really cool. I'm interested to talk about it, and let's take a look. So very, very interesting question. You'll come up with this, or you'll come up against this issue a lot in production. There's a lot of character interaction, especially in creature features, a lot of work where you're definitely having to deal with characters actually manipulating and physically interacting with each other. And there is a time when it's appropriate to do this, kind of parenting or a constraint system. There's time when it's inappropriate. Another piece of the question, though, asks in regards to if you have a character grab another character. So let me just go through some of the ground rules, basically, with how this works. If you have a character that is physically moving the entire body of another character, not like grabbing them by the arm and yanking them around, you definitely want, if they're grabbing them by the arm to be the constraint point for that IK hand of the person that's grabbing them, so that it sticks. All right, now that seems a little bit backwards, because you'd think, well, he's pulling the other guy around. Doesn't it seem like now it's the arm that's driving him? Well, yes, kind of. You do have that problem where you can get to a point where the animation, or sort of like the wrong thing driving it, can be very apparent in the animation, so you got to be very careful. But it is harder to have a rig that has an IK arm or even an FK arm stick to a hand, and even more importantly, which is the way you would want to animate it if you could, reroute the skeleton so that this is like basically the parent of the entire IK chain. I've done a shot where I basically kind of rerouted a skeleton, and if you look at this constraints lecture, I think it's either January or February, I did a lecture on constraints. You'd want to check this out, because I do something where I create some locators and I basically reroute a skeleton so that it can do something that I want to do. But anyway, so the rule of thumb is, if you're not moving the entire body of the character, then you want to actually use the character that's being moved to have points on the rig that you're constraining the hand to. Okay, and it's going to be tough, because you're going to have to animate that little guy as if he's being pulled around, when in reality, really the distance in the outstretched arm of that police officer in the example was that distance is going to be dictated by that smaller character. So it's kind of difficult. And but not impossible, of course. And then the other rule is kind of the opposite. If the character is being fully bodily moved around, then you can constrain, don't parent, but constrain the character's master controller to the other character or to a new controller or a new locator. Okay? So let me go through a couple other interesting scenarios. Here we have bloke, and I'm going to add a reference of a rig called RETT, R-H-E-T-T, okay? And it's a horse rig, all right? And so here's one of the first issues that you have. Bloke is absolutely minuscule compared to this horse. Now, some rigs scale really well. Some of them don't scale really well. So the problem with that is that if you have a rig that can't scale, then you better be darn sure that your other rig will scale up nicely. And now scale actually affects things like subsurface scattering, basically the material that like makes stuff waxy and translucent. It affects how big something looks depending on how much light actually transfers through. So a small little candle looks a lot different than like a marble statue. Okay, so I've positioned bloke. He's a really small horse. I know. It's kind of funny though. I like it. So what you'd want to do now is just find on your rig what is the control that really ought to dictate bloke's movement. And so looking at the different controls, trying out the hips, okay, trying out the shoulders, okay. It seems that this middle shaper actually is the best one to constrain it to, because it looks like it moves basically in between the shoulders and the hips. So it's actually a good one. So I'm just going to grab this control. I'm going to grab bloke's master controller right here. Hit F2 to go to the animation menu, and then go constrain parent. And we don't need to do a scale constraint because we've already scaled him up. So now when we move the horse around or we rotate him or whatever, we have bloke attached. Now, then we start getting into interesting territory. So let me actually delete this constraint and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so now the constraint's deleted. Let's say we're doing a shot like in Lord of the Rings, where Legolas is running up the leg of that, I can't remember what they call them, Oliphants, something like that, like Oliphant or something. It sounds like elephant, but it's like, oh, Lord of the Rings word for elephant. Anyway, so this is about the right scale for that, all right? So what do you do? How do you make it so that the character is working basically, you know, on the, if he's running, or for instance, let's put him up here, if he's running along the back, right? Well, you need to have control over the super mover. So if the character, while your character is running down here, imagine if it was constrained to the neck right here, but then I have the neck go like this. Let me just show you. I'm just going to constrain parent and then move this. Let's say he's like over here. It's like, oh, roar, he's roaring his head, and now look what's happening to my character. So that's a big problem. So what are you going to do? My advice for situations like this, if you had this gigantic, you know, horse and he's bucking and he's moving all around, would be to constrain your super mover or master control to the biggest control you possibly could. Okay, so something like either this big controller back here, or maybe the shoulders or the chest. And then you have a lot of work to do to make sure that as he's running down and this character, you know, like bends his neck like this, that you reposition and work really, really hard to get it working nicely. One thing that you can do is mute the animation on your main character. So let's say that there's a couple keys like this and he's freaking out. Okay, so he's wiggling like this. what I would definitely recommend is as you start moving bloke, you grab this character and you just right click on the channels and you say mute selected, which is up here. And then as you roll forward the animation, you haven't deleted the animation. It's still there, but then you could finally grab bloke and you could move him, you know, down the back as the character is bucking around. Another thing that you might consider, and if you have enough time to do this, then, you know, so be it, but another thing that you might consider is actually switching the constraint of his master controller to whatever control it's near, and do all of your animation kind of in place, meaning he leaps off like this, and you might stretch out the, oops, let's see here, you might stretch out, where is his foot? Oh, here it is. Stretch out his foot like this, and then move the controller like this, like he's flying through the air, right? And then he basically, you bring it together like this, he rotates, and then comes down, boom, hits right here, lands, and then you animate this to do the landing or whatever. And the only reason that I would suggest that you start doing an animation like that where you're using the master control is for when, like let's say it's like a 300 frame shot, and for like 110 frames, he's stuck right here. And then for 30 frames, he jumps onto the, like it's him jumping onto the back, okay? And then he's stuck to the back for another 160 frames. So you need the character to be actually stuck to the front and stuck to the back. The other way you could do it is you could actually just animate the constraint between this front neck controller and this back hips controller, and it'd be pretty easy. All you do is go right here, constrain parent, this one as well, constrain parent, and then set a key on the mover, turn it up to 1, and then set these 2, and start this one at 0. So I'm going to move him. Basically, I'm going to move bloke's main controller right here, okay, from there to there. So that's how far he goes, right? So at the beginning, he's stuck right here, and I'm going to move this back. I'm going to set another key this, and then by right here, oops, 0, 1. Set this, and then I'm going to move this like down, up, like that. Okay, so as you can see in the beginning, he's moving with the neck, and then he jumps over here, and then he's moving. Oops, I didn't set a key. Oh, the channels are still muted. By the way, you can actually set keys on muted channels. Anyway. So there we go. And now he's on the back. So interesting situations can come up when you have to start having characters constrained to one another. The very last thing that I would say about that is, just to recap, if you have like a character grabbing someone, then that contact point needs to be really stuck. So actually, it's a little bit backwards. You want that arm driving the person who's grabbing it. You driving that IK, right? If it's way bigger, or if it's a person riding a horse or a dragon or whatever, you definitely constrain the master controls together, and you're kind of done. The one last situation that I would say is kind of interesting is when you have characters going into and out of a relationship together, meaning he jumps onto the back of the horse and then like something hits the horse and that he gets thrown off. In that case, I might actually make a new controller. So I would go like this. I would go create locator. One quick way that you can use to get a object to move to another object's pivot point, if you're, I mean, this is a rig and there's a lot of nested transforms on this control, and it's not actually going to give me 0 transforms if I parent this locator underneath this and then just reset transforms. That's normally what you can do to make it so that one object actually moves to the center of another. Let me just show you that really quickly, just so that you have that for reference. So here's 2 objects. This one's smaller than this one. If I select this other one and parent it and then reset transforms, or otherwise known as zeroing it out, it always goes to the origin or the pivot point of its parent. That won't work normally with rigs unless the rig was meticulously created, and this one is just not quite there. But at any rate, so a quick way you can do it is just select the parent, select the child, and then open up your point constraint, make sure and maintain offset is off and constrain axis is all, and then hit add. And now my locator is actually at the pivot of this control. And then you just delete the point constraint out of the outliner. And then I like to freeze transformations. And now this is this locator's new home. Okay, so if I was going to do like crazy interaction where they go into and out of interaction with each other, this is how I would do it. So from 1 to, let's say, 8, he moves and jumps onto the butt. Then right on frame 8, we would parent constraint the bloke's master control to this new locator. And also on 8, constrain the horse. Okay. Set a key. Let's say they both get like knocked over and to the side. And then it keeps on going for the horse. And he falls down. Oh. Boom. Splat. Okay. But right in the middle of where the horse is getting knocked over, bloke falls off. So in frame 16, we set a key. And then frame 17, we turn off the parent constraint. And then let's say he has a parachute. Okay, so he floats up in the air, and then after 20 frames, just floats down or whatever. Okay, so here we go. I used something like this on King Kong when I had Kong tackle a T-Rex, and it worked pretty nicely. So here we go. Here's our constraint setup. So from frame 1 to 8, bloke jumps on, then they get hit, and at 16, he pulls his parachute and floats down, and the horse just falls over. Okay, you see that? Now it's going to be hard, right? Because I have this master controller land right here, and so what I would have to do is use the controls, use bloke's controls to make this look believable. So let's do that. All right, let's put his feet on here. And then as he is landing, boom, and then he kind of overlaps and lands like this, and then he's falling, so he's like, whoa, over like this. What's going on? And then maybe he anticipates down right here and jumps. Okay, like that. So here we go. Now this is not timed out, but you basically have the right idea. So he lands, boom, jumps, and then floats down. Boom. Okay, so Pretty simple, but you can get into the woods fast if you constrain in the wrong place, not watching where you're constraining it and thinking about where the most amount of movement is going to happen, where that relationship is, or if you try to do too much with the master controller and there's not that much interaction. Okay, so just remember that your master controller will move your whole body, and you need to use the controls of the body, that, you know, the cog and the feet and the arms, legs, spine, head, all of that, to continue to pose it and make sure that that interaction is working well. And then worst case scenario, as I kind of showed off here, you can actually create a locator that is kind of keeping everything just in one family. Just keeping track of everything is the idea. Okay? Great question. Really, really liked it. Please send more. If you haven't sent a question, it's a great way to interact with the site and get the most value for your subscription. I appreciate all your support. Keep sending those questions. Keep kicking butt with your animation. And as always, rock on.